Good evening. In June 2025, the Middle East reached a breaking point. A 12-day war between Israel and Iran, halted by a rushed ceasefire brokered by President Trump, with Qatar, China, and the EU in the background. This wasn't a diplomatic victory. It was a desperate pause to contain chaos. The world watched as missiles flew and economies trembled, but the ceasefire was just a lid on a boiling pot. The core issues, nuclear ambitions, regional power struggles, and old grievances remain unresolved. Tonight, we'll cut through the headlines and reveal 10 hard truths about the fragile new Middle East emerging from this conflict. These are the insights you need to understand what comes next. The June 24th ceasefire is not peace, it's a tactical pause between exhausted adversaries. The guns are silent, but violations continue in the shadows: drone incursions, cyber attacks, and military repositioning. Both Israel and Iran claim victory, but both are urgently rebuilding their arsenals and patching vulnerabilities. Political divisions are deepening in both countries, with unity governments and public support already fraying. The ceasefire is a fragile, temporary suspension of open warfare, not a breakthrough. The drivers of conflict, nuclear ambitions, regional dominance, and decades of animosity are untouched. This is a pause, not a resolution. The next spark could reignite the flames at any moment. During the conflict, the world feared an oil shock, but the worst didn't happen. Gulf producers ramped up output, and major consumers like China and India secured supplies, stabilizing markets. Oil prices spiked briefly, but quickly settled. The system bent, but didn't break. Yet, this resilience was a best-case scenario. The conflict was short. The Strait of Hormuz stayed open, and spare capacity is now depleted. The margin for error is gone. One more crisis could trigger the price shock everyone fears. Policymakers risk complacency, mistaking luck for security. The world is now one incident away from disaster. The lesson: resilience is not guaranteed. After its nuclear sites were struck, Iran didn't capitulate, it recalibrated. Tehran responded with limited force, signaling resolve but avoiding all-out war. The regime spun the conflict as a test of resilience, but behind the rhetoric, a strategic reset is underway. Iran is deepening ties with China, Russia, and BRICS+, aiming to build a sanctions-proof network. Quietly, it's also courting Gulf neighbors, pushing for regional security talks and economic integration. The Saudis and Emiratis, shaken by the war's risks, are listening. This isn't retreat. It's a pivot to embed Iran more deeply in the region's future. Iran is turning crisis into opportunity. The old order is shifting. Israel, rattled by the war, faces a crossroads: real diplomatic pivot or political survival tactic. Netanyahu's government is reaching out to Jordan, Turkey, and Gulf states, seeking new alliances against Iran. The shared threat has made normalization with Saudi Arabia and the UAE a strategic imperative. But at home, public trauma and skepticism run deep. Security remains the top concern. Every diplomatic move is weighed against political cost. The opposition accuses the government of weakness, fueling fierce debate. This pivot is less about peace and more about survival, for the nation and its leaders. The foundations are shaky, built on necessity, not trust. Israel's next steps will shape the region's future. Beyond politics, the region's youth, over 60% under 30, are demanding change. Digitally connected and globally aware, they reject the old cycles of conflict and corruption. During the war, young people used social media to share unfiltered stories, organize cross-border dialogues, and fact-check propaganda. Now they're leading protests, demanding jobs, freedom, and dignity, not just a ceasefire. Creative activism is everywhere: viral campaigns, anti-corruption apps, and art protests. The old guard is struggling to contain this energy. Shutting down the internet or arresting activists can't silence a generation's demand for a better future. These young voices are the region's real agents of change. They see the ceasefire as a window for transformation. Their movement is only growing. In the wake of war, spontaneous interfaith gatherings emerged across the region. Moments of shared silence and prayer, not orchestrated by leaders, but by ordinary people. Artists, teachers, and students organized vigils, reaching across sectarian lines in defiance of official narratives. These acts of moral courage highlight faith's power to heal, even as leaders exploit it for division. People are drawing on core values: mercy, forgiveness, the sanctity of life, to build bridges politics can't. But let's be clear. Grassroots healing isn't a substitute for political solutions. A vigil can't disarm a missile or resolve a nuclear standoff. Still, these moments lay the moral foundation for a future peace. They're a testament to the human spirit's resilience. hope persists even in the shadow of war. The missiles may be silent, but the cyber war is raging. Since the ceasefire, cyber attacks have escalated, targeting power grids, water plants, banks, and government systems. This is the new battlefield, invisible, constant, and dangerously unpredictable. States across the region are pouring billions into digital arsenals, fueling a security dilemma. Much of this technology comes from Western firms, often with little oversight. The world is arming the next conflict, making everyone less safe. A major cyber attack could be as devastating as any missile strike. The digital war is loud, and the world is unprepared. In Gaza, reconstruction is underway. Solar clinics, 3D printed homes, tech hubs. These projects offer hope, but they're band-aids on a deep wound. International aid brings headlines, but without political solutions, it's just crisis management. Rebuilding schools and homes means little if they're destroyed again in the next conflict. The blockade, occupation, and lack of sovereignty remain unaddressed. Progress without justice is a cycle of deprivation and despair. For Gazans, new houses are just new targets without real peace. The core disease remains untreated. The US helped broker the ceasefire, but quickly shifted focus, leaving the region to manage the aftermath. This time, Gulf states aren't waiting for America. They're building their own security alliances, often including Israel. Regional powers are hedging bets, balancing ties with the US, China, Russia, and each other. A new, flexible security framework is emerging, less dependent on Washington. It's a declaration of independence from the old patron-client model. But this autonomy brings risks, new blocs, rivalries, and instability. The US fade leaves a power vacuum. Will it bring stability or new dangers? The answer is still uncertain. Amid the ruins, a cultural renaissance is challenging official narratives. Artists, filmmakers, and musicians are telling their own stories, building empathy across divides. Film festivals, viral songs, and underground art are creating shared spaces where walls briefly fall. But culture alone can't reform systems built on repression. Governments are learning to weaponize soft power for PR. Real change needs political and social reform alongside cultural shifts. These stories are vital, but they're just the beginning. Culture can fight lies, but it can't build peace alone. So where does this leave us? The ceasefire was emergency triage, not a solution. The region is holding its breath, the deep wounds remain. Real change isn't coming from outside powers. It's being forged by pragmatic leaders, determined youth, and resilient societies. These are fragile green shoots in the concrete of the old order. The US stopped the shooting, but didn't fix the conflict's roots. The hard work of building a sustainable peace hasn't begun. Which truth struck you most? What gives you hope or fear? Comment below and join the conversation. Subscribe and share if you want real analysis, not platitudes. Thank you for watching.